I'm Tara Brabazon, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Professor Priscilla Dunk-West to our weekly conversations. And I'm so enjoying these conversations, and thank you to all the wonderful people who are listening along. You are precious and you are fabulous. And this week, we wanted to talk about motivation. Because yes, dear friends, tough times. Tough times. The irrationality, the marginalisation of quality and expertise, the profound weirdness of our time really needs to be talked about. And how do scholars stay motivated in these times? How do we get up in the morning? How do we continue to research and read and think and write? Let's talk with Priscilla and explore her motivations and her methodologies to continue to work and think and transcend. Now, Priscilla, a lot of weird things are happening on the planet at the moment, and that's just Donald Trump's America. But it makes me sort of think, how can we be positive? How can we look to the future in a proactive way when it appears so much around us is crumbling? And so therefore I wanted to talk about motivation, and I've never asked you this question, but what motivated you to enter academic life?
Oh gosh, I think lots of things. I think I am a nerd at heart, and so I love theory and I love studying, and so that became kind of my thing about how to view the world, make sense of the world through theory and different theoretical lenses. And I was actually working in sexual health at the time, and I'd started to flirt with the idea. I'm first in family to university, so I'd flirted with the idea, could I do a PhD? Am I someone who could do a PhD? No, I couldn't do a PhD. So I had that sort of to and fro for a couple of years, I have to say.
Wow.
And then I was seeing people in counselling, and I was seeing them about sexual problems or intimacy problems or issues they were having in their relationships. And I'd look to the texts and theories, and I'd see this very medically dominated set of literature that talked about dysfunction and talked about, that if this happened, then that would happen, and it was terrible. And yet I'd see people in my room counselling, and they'd just have all these creative solutions to things. They were getting by. They had really tough things happen, but were so resilient. And I thought, I think this is what I want to study. And so then that led me into do a PhD in sociology, looking at everyday sexuality. So day-to-day, non-problematic, non-pathologized sexuality. Yeah. So that's what led me in.
Well, I tell you what, you've already picked up what's going to be a future podcast for us, can I say? My goodness me. But so it was an interest in content, and also you had the meta-argument with yourself, can I do it? And you had to summon the belief, and it was the passionate interest in the content and the gap, what was not being talked about, that led you to it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely, yes. Yeah.
That's amazing. So, look, in our careers, and this is just me, but in our careers, we've got to manage a lot of, let's just say, ambivalence, marginalisation, disrespect. And what are your strategies to manage the people in our lives who are critics or the doubters? And how do we maintain our focus and our motivation when all these people around us maybe think we're a bit rubbish?
The haters. I think, first of all, the context of academia is that it can be and usually is a really highly competitive environment. So you've got people going on there, people who want to step into that space and feel good about themselves will step in and say that person's rubbish because of this, or they don't like this. So there's always going to be people who are going to say what you're doing, you're not good enough. Universities, when you're an academic, can make you feel like you're never good enough. You're not getting enough grants, you don't have enough publications, or you have publications, but they're the wrong publications, or you're not teaching enough, or you haven't taught enough, or you're teaching too much. So there's always going to be something that is designed to make you feel a bit rubbish about yourself. and kind of fearful of, I don't kind of I don't match up to the expectations. So I think acknowledging that and knowing that that is the environment, because then that what does that do? It produces people who are going to work really, really hard and give their labour to do all of the things and do it, work really, really hard. So, that's a kind of, I guess, a meta kind of view. And then I think the other thing is that, thinking about why would people criticise, or why would people have that position? And look, there can be people in universities who are rightly criticised, and you and I have talked about power and positionality. So, asking yourself some critical questions. Is there something in this? For example, am I taking all these opportunities for myself and not opening it up to other people? Am I being a good leader? Asking yourself the tough questions.
Wonderful. I
think can be helpful. But then the other thing I think is and this probably comes from me as a bit of an outsider, and have always sort of seen myself as a bit of a fringe dweller, and I love that position.
Woo!
At the edges, in the margins.
Bell hooks, bell hooks.
Yes, that's right. And so I think that gives you a really nice sense of being able to analyse or see from a distance what's happening. Because if you're in the centre and you're being criticised and you're positioning yourself in the centre, it can feel really awful to be criticised by other people. So from the margins, ask yourself, if not me, then who? Who's going to take up this space? If you're coming at it from, like me, first in family, a woman, a queer woman, it's important for those voices to be heard. So think about whose voices are at the centre, and think about yourself, and that you belong and you deserve to be there, and, have that conviction of, leading the charge or leading the way or taking up the charge to start to decenter some of those voices that have been dominant in the academy. That's a very long answer to that.
I think that's a great answer. And what's so important, I think, with that answer is that there is a different way. A lot of us, we're going to talk about leadership in a sec, but a lot of us entered leadership when we came from that, working class background or all sorts of marginalised or outlier positionings. We came to leadership because often we were treated disgracefully, and we didn't want any other human being to have to go through what we went through. And certainly my Canadian experience was that, and it was so horrific that I made a decision I would start from the bottom in a leadership role, because that's where working class women, that's where we gained our leadership role, and then make sure that no other human experienced that. So, and create that infrastructure of care that you and I have talked about, a different way of leading. And that leads to my third question, and it is about leadership, and particularly research leaders, I think. How can we support and care for our colleagues so that they can succeed? And maybe we stop this adversarial, nasty, culture and environment. Or do you think it's productive?
Look, there's an argument, isn't there, that that critiquing of other people, that's important, or being able to talk about somebody else or critique others in a workplace is important as a kind of ethical sort of, a way to kind of call out unethical things that are happening. So you need a culture of that, but you don't need it to be overly critical of people, and you want a workplace that's productive and healthy and is good to come to, and people enjoy working with other people. You want that, so you want a safe work environment. And so I think thinking about what is my contribution, what do I want to be known for, or how do I want to be in the world, and it's that thing that you said about I'm similar to you in that I do feel a sense of responsibility to be a good leader and to help people up, like open the door or put the ladder out, or whatever metaphor you want, in having experienced the absence of that for myself in a lot of spaces in my career. And I got into academia through, in social work we have field education, and some fabulous women in that space really inspired me and helped me into academia that way. And so, doing the work of opening up this sometimes very secret world.
Yeah.
So sometimes it can be as simple as saying, oh, this is how this works. Oh, yeah, so I know people who have done this, or this is what I did. So sharing knowledge in that way in a system that's very quiet about some things. It's like the secret of getting a grant, or the secret of, developing relationships with external bodies. It can be seen as these kind of very quiet methods or processes that people engage in. So being transparent, I suppose, is what I'm trying to get to around helping people understand the rules of the game, and doing that through mentoring, doing that through sharing information, doing that through being a good human, creating a safe workplace, celebrating diversity.
Yeah.
Super, super important. So yeah, the standard sort of things, I think, in terms of seeing what you do as a practice. So seeing
Lovely.
research as a practice, or seeing leadership as a practice of doing and being,
I
rather
think that's
than
phenomenal.
not thinking about it.
And I just think coming to life, let alone coming to a workplace, knowing that success is not a finite resource. I think so often in university life, people are sort of, fighting over the cookies. And look, there are plenty of cookies. And you know what? There's interesting cheese at the next table.
Yeah,
and there's some
make another dish.
Yeah, there's a posh torta in the kitchen.
Yes.
There's all sorts of ways of thinking about success rather than this sort of singular, and I would argue masculine, heteronormative, Oxbridge, 1950s pyramidal career. I think the pyramid is over, which of course leads me to my final question. I've loved this. Oh, I feel all energised and excited now. But what inspires you to keep writing? And we talk about this a lot in our life outside of this podcast. But what inspires you to keep writing, to get up in the morning and make a decision to produce research that day?
I think I recently wrote a book with a colleague about qualitative research and kind of changing the world through research. And I do think, for me, research is a practice of doing, but also asking a research question is a really political thing to do. And it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning about when I was in practice and I saw people who in a textbook might be said, this person experiences sexual dysfunction, which will impact their self-esteem, and, have this very almost like an epistemological kind of perspective about a person and how the problem has taken over everything. And so in taking the view that people's voices in research are silenced and not heard, in taking that view as that first step towards doing a PhD, and saying there's a whole bunch of people whose experiences aren't present in research, that's the same thing that motivates me today, I think, is looking for a new perspective on a research problem that helps people's voices who have been heard be heard. And I guess that's still my motivation. It's seeing research as a pretty radical thing, not just something that I have to do as in my job, but actually something that can make a difference to the world, can give people voice, can have people speaking back to the way in which perhaps they've been medicalised or pathologised or seen as less than, but looks to their creative strategies that they have to managing adversity, difficulties, that gives voice to people who are marginalised. So they're the things that still motivate me as a researcher.
See, isn't that amazing to get up in the morning and, as you said, be propelled by research questions? That's changed my life. Propelled by research questions to activate an intervention in the world so that people are not problems, problems are not proxies, and we're dealing with a whole human being in their diversity and their fabulousness. And if that's what a great research project can do and enliven and assist, then I think we're using our days pretty well. That motivates me very strongly.
Excellent. Great.
You're a superstar. Thank you for your time. You're a legend, my love.
Thank you.